My name is Shen Jian, and I'm a program manager in SQL Server. Today, I'd like to introduce to you the key private cloud enabling features in SQL Server 2012. In this release, we have made significant investment to give you more control and to make your life easier in a private cloud setting. Some of the key benefits I'd like to highlight here are increased density, flexible high availability, better isolation, and improved manageability. First, let's take a look at how we achieve higher density without compromising SQL Server performance. Well, for one, SQL Server works well and performs well with dynamic memory. Previously, memory for a virtual machine is allocated statically, meaning resizing can only take effect after restart. In SQL Server 2012, we start supporting dynamic memory in Standard Edition and above. Dynamic memory is a Hyper-V feature introduced in Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. It allows memory usage of the virtual machines to dynamically grow or shrink based on its actual needs, so it is online and on demand. Administrators no longer need to allocate memory based on guests or peak usage just because it might need that much. So we get more efficient memory utilization this way. We also redesigned the Memory Manager in SQL Server 2012. Previously, when you set the max server memory, what you're really setting is the limit on the buffer pool. With the Memory Manager enhancement in this release, the max server memory setting is a much closer indication of how much memory your SQL Server instance really needs, because it also includes the multi-page allocation. This, again, is very useful in capacity planning in the private cloud. Also, we introduced the SQL Server support on Windows Server Core. Not only does this help increase density because it has a smaller memory and also disk footprint, but it has a number of other benefits. So fewer things running, so fewer things can go wrong. Also, 50 to 60% fewer OS patch reboots are needed, so better availability. And there is less to attack, so it's more secure. In short, SQL Server running on Server Core is definitely a recommended practice in private cloud. Always-on features are also key to this release, and they prove to be very relevant in the private cloud scenarios. With active secondaries, you get a higher return on your high availability investments because you can increase your hardware utilization through active secondaries to offload reporting and backup tasks. This is very useful in the centrally managed database service scenario, where you can provide a highly available database service and have your backups and reporting running on your secondaries behind the scenes, such that from the user's point of view, they have a set of highly available services. Also, this can be useful, for example, in the self-service provisioning scenario in a private cloud, where people can request their own VMs, provision their SQL Server instances, and set up active secondaries and backup secondaries all as part of self-provisioning in SQL Server Private Cloud. Similarly, you can set up availability groups to bundle your databases together, which allow databases to fail over together as a unit, so you get faster failover, faster recovery, and easier administration. With the GeoCluster multi-subnet support, you can practically implement your private cloud in more than one physical data center, which is great for disaster recovery scenario. Another key scenario in private cloud is multi-tenancy. With the resource governor, multi-tenancy can be supported within SQL Server beyond the container of virtual machine. Here, the virtual container is a resource pool. For example, if you are a hoster and would like to run fewer instances of SQL Server to give the customers the perception that they have been given their own virtual machines, you can do this with resource pools, where you can allocate a certain minimum and maximum of CPU and memory to the resource pool, and then you can create workload groups and a classifier function where connections, when come in, can be routed to the appropriate resource pools. Well, you probably wonder, this is already supported in Resource Governor, then what's new in this release? Well, one common ask from our customer we got is, our machines are getting bigger and more powerful, and we want to provide each of our customer a resource pool, but we're limited to 20 in previous releases. So now, with SQL Server 2012, you can have up to 64 resource pools. This is more than triple the numbers that we used to support, which is great for application density and multi-tenant isolation on single instances. Chargeback is also made easier. So if you're billing customers based on resource usage such as CPU or memory, customers can get predictable billing. So we introduced the max cap on CPU usage. For example, if the resource pool is limited to 20 or 30% of the CPU, that's exactly what you can use. Previously, with Resource Governor, however, if the machine is idle, you can effectively use up all the CPU. So now if you set a cap, you will only use what you've set. Further, once you set the resource pools, you can affinitize a resource pool to a CPU scheduler and affinitize your CPU scheduler to a CPU or a set of CPUs. So you're effectively affinitizing your resource pool to your set of CPUs or NUMA nodes, which gives you much better control and isolation in a multi-tenancy environment. So in SQL Server 2012, we also enhanced manageability, which is another critical aspect of private cloud. With compliance getting increasingly important, what we frequently heard from our customers who are deploying or implementing private cloud is there can be conflicts of interests between the different roles, say between the different DBA roles and operator roles. It takes a lot of time and effort to figure out who should be doing what. Since we already have predefined server roles in previous releases, in this release, we took a step further. Now you can define your own roles, which supports separation of duties when you have different roles doing different things. Another area of improvement is default schema for groups. Well, this has been around for a while as a good way of partitioning databases. But what we often heard from our customers is, it would be good if you have default schema, for example, per Windows group. And that's exactly what we have introduced in this release, which makes provisioning self-services at a business group level much easier and much more straightforward. Also in SQL Server 2012, we enhanced the database portability through contained database authentication. This essentially takes away the dependencies on the actual machine or the instances, so you can easily move databases to another server and start working right away. So in conclusion, SQL Server 2012 is going to make your life of provisioning and deploying private cloud easier through increased density, improved high availability, better multi-tenancy support, as well as enhanced manageability. Of course, depending on your constraints as an organization and also readiness along the journey of private cloud, with SQL Server 2012, you can choose to build your private cloud yourself, which takes the longest time to solution, or you can leverage our referenced architecture, which is a tested solution with specific guidance on software and hardware, or you can choose our appliance, which is our ultimate push-of-a-button solution with proven performance and scalability. So now I'd like to show you in action how to leverage the new features in Resource Governor to support multi-tenancy scenario. First, I'd like to point out that I have 4 cores on this particular machine, but I'll be only using one just so that it's easier to see. What I can do is to set the affinity mask to 1, and then I can create 2 resource pools, pool A and pool B. Also, I'll be creating 2 workload groups, one for each resource pool. I'll also be creating 2 user logins. You can think of them as 2 of your customers in the multi-tenancy environment. For example, if you're a hoster, they can be 2 of your clients. Next, we can create a classifier function so that when the user connections come in, they can be mapped or routed to the appropriate resource pool. Now let's make sure all these changes to my resource governor are going to take effect. With that, we can pull up the performance counter. I have already added 2 perf counters for my pool A and also pool B in terms of CPU usage. What I'll do next is to run my workload. So I can first start my workload A, which is a computationally heavy workload for my customer A. What you immediately see is that the CPU consumption spikes up all the way up to 25%. As I previously mentioned, as I'm only using 1 out of the 4 CPUs on this machine, 25% is the maximum it can get. Now, I like to start my workload B. And at the same time, you start to see that this green line start to spike up, and my red line associated with customer A starts to come down, and they met somewhere in the middle. Well, this is because the 2 workloads are pretty similar and they are sharing the same CPU. What if I want to provide better guarantee for my customer A because it is more important? Well, what I can do in here is that I can set the min CPU percent to a certain level, say 75% in this particular example. What you'll notice is that in here they start to depart, and the consumption by user A starts to hover around 20, which is about 75% of the entire CPU. And the green line for customer B gets the rest. Well, if my customer A finish off the workload, then we can see that customer B starts to consume all the CPU, all the way up to 25%. What if my customer B does not want to pay for this much usage? What you can do in this particular case is that you can set the cap of CPU. This is the new feature that we have introduced in this new release in Resource Governor. And immediately, that's the result that you're going to get. So this is going no more than 50%. So in short, with the Resource Governor, the new features, now you can create this virtual container and rely on it to provide a better isolation between the competing workloads and provide even more predictable billing for your customers. I would highly encourage you to give these new features a try and let us know what you think. You can check out our website at www.microsoft.com/SQL Server Private Cloud. Thank you.